Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod, episode number 121. Thank you guys so much for joining us as always. It is a great joy and privilege to be here with you guys and just discussing all sorts of exciting things as we round the corner into March. March is, I feel like, and I don't know about you guys, I'm not going to keep the intro long, but just to say, I feel like March is a big month because it's really when I think the movie season starts to kick off, the TV season. I mean, we have the Oscars coming up, right? So that's exciting. Right after that is Daredevil Born Again. And also don't forget about Project Hail Mary. So a lot of really exciting things coming up. But anyways, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about a lot of other fun and interesting things as well today. So guys, thank you so much for joining us. As always, if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, make sure to do so. Give this video a like if you could, and leave a comment down below with anything that you're thinking about any of these topics as well. And if you're interested in the audio-only platform, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Overcast, we are available there. That is where the podcast is uploaded in full before it is uploaded on YouTube Saturday mornings in the US time. So make sure to check it out there, and then check it out on YouTube as well if you want to do that. Guys, thank you so much again. We are diving into today's topic, so let's get into it. Let's get into today's topics. Alrighty, guys, big day for our Defenders Saga rewatch because today we're going to be talking about the final series that Netflix released before the MCU took over the Netflix shows. That is right. We have come so far. I was actually just taking a look at the playlist that we'd compiled, and all those videos, all those segments are available in a playlist on the YouTube channel, on the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel. So check it out there. Subscribe as well if you are hanging out there. But it has been such a fun, wild journey to go from Daredevil Season 1 and watch every single season all the way up until Jessica Jones Season 3, which we are going to talk about today. Now, if you are new to the channel, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Subscribe, give a like, all that good stuff. We have been doing a Defenders Saga revisiting over the last year, and almost perfect timing as we head to Daredevil Born Again Season 2, hopefully very soon when you are listening to this segment. For context, I myself had previously seen in around 2019 Daredevil Season 1, 2, Defenders, and then Daredevil Season 3. I had not, however, seen any of the other shows. They didn't appeal to me at the time. I think I gave a couple episodes of Jessica Jones a try and just didn't really click with me the same way that Daredevil did. So didn't watch those and went on my way. And then obviously we saw Matt Murdock appear in Spider-Man No Way Home, Kingpin in Hawkeye, and the rest is history, right? Because now all these shows are MCU canon. And so as Daredevil Born Again Season 1 was kicking off, I decided, you know what, let's rewatch Daredevil. And lo and behold, that led to this entire cascading effect where over the last year, I have basically nonstop been watching these shows, and I am finally caught up. It is my hope, because guys, this isn't the last video we're going to be doing this series. I want to do a couple more. I do want to do a separate segment revisiting Daredevil Born Again Season 1, hopefully right before Season 2 comes out, and then I do want to do a ranking. I don't know if I'll wait for the ranking after Daredevil Born Again Season 2 comes out, or if I'll do one before and then do one after, or just do one before, but I do want to do a ranking, because I've been keeping tabs, I've been keeping a ranking internally, and I want to share that with you guys over the next few weeks as well. So hopefully those will be the next couple segments in this series. But anyways, guys, today I'm really excited because regardless of if we get to Daredevil Born Again Season 1 before Daredevil Born Again Season 2, I've caught up. I've completely caught up, and just in time because Jessica Jones will be appearing in Daredevil Born Again Season 2. So I'm just excited. I'm really happy that I was able to do this. So anyways, that was a huge preamble. Just wanted to give you some context and some background before we dive in. Let's talk about this season though. We're here to talk about Jessica Jones Season 3. So Jessica Jones, honestly, is a show that I have not loved throughout my time rewatching and watching these for the first time. I think Season 1 was good. It felt flawed to me, much like the character herself, but it was fine. It was good. Season 2, though, really took me for a spin because I was not expecting the whole mom arc with Jessica's mom, and I just wasn't expecting to dislike that season as much. I think it is fighting with Iron Fist Season 1 to be at the bottom of the list so far. It really just did not appeal to me that much. So, heading into Season 3, I was thinking, well, I don't know. Maybe I'll just set my expectations to Season 2 because nobody really talks about Season 3. Everyone's like, oh, Season 1 is great. So I just assumed, okay, well, if no one's talking about Season 3, just as no one really talks about Season 2, then maybe it's not so good. So that was really my expectation heading into the season. And for all of my doubts for Season 3, well, I do think Season 3 just reaches the ceiling that I personally have for Jessica Jones as a show, which we'll talk about in just a second, but you guys can extrapolate based on my reviews of the last two seasons. I just think that Jessica Jones as a show and as a character has a certain limit to its appeal for me. And for better or for worse, Jessica Jones Season 3 is another season of Jessica Jones full on. So, if you were expecting anything different, that's not the case. But I do think it is far more interesting than Season 2. It is better executed than Season 2. And while it doesn't reach the same levels of Season 1, I think that I found myself pretty captivated by a decent bit of the show. And I think that, honestly, at this point, I'll just take that as a win. And, one funny thing, actually, before we dive into this in more detail, one funny thing about watching Jessica Jones Season 2 and 3 is that when I remember, and I actually re-listened to the segment I did on Jessica Jones Season 1, because I was just curious to hear what I thought about it at the time. But things change. And I remember at the time, Jessica Jones Season 1 being fine. It was okay. It was fine. But nothing spectacular, in my opinion. And I do think, after seeing Seasons 2 and 3, I have gained a much deeper appreciation for Season 1. I really have. Not that I think Season 1 is anything near Daredevil Born Again, or Daredevil Season 3, or Daredevil Season 1, or anything like that. Nothing like that. But I have gained a little bit of a bigger appreciation for the show, or for the season. And I think one big reason that connects to Season 3 is that Kilgrave is such a fascinating character and played so well by David Tennant. I think that Salinger, or rather the idea of Salinger, a serial killer, is a really good antagonist for a character like Jessica Jones as a PI, as somebody who's grappling with her identity as a hero. Does she want to be a hero? Does she want to do good? Does she not want to do good? That's sort of where her character has landed at this point in Season 3. I think that concept as a character is a very interesting one. Right? And I think that having a serial killer kind of character like Greg Salinger, who's going to go after everyone she cares about and who is kind of ruthless in that way, I think is a very interesting opposition to a character like Jessica Jones versus David Tennant's Kilgrave, who I think had more of an emotional attachment to Jessica Jones. This is just a cold-blooded killer in Greg Salinger. And I think that's, in concept, is an interesting idea. However, I apologize, I don't know who the actor is, I don't remember his name, who plays the character of Salinger. I just don't think, because again, it's fine. I don't need the serial killer to have superpowers or supervillain powers or whatever. I don't. I really don't. But I do think that if you're gonna have this character just be a normal guy, totally fine, right? Totally fine. But this normal guy has to be, A, captivating, charismatic enough to watch him, B, threatening enough for Jessica Jones to really be a threat against someone like Jessica Jones. And because the only reason that Jessica Jones holds back is her own quote unquote morality, I guess, and also just the fact that the show doesn't want her to kill Salinger, but also, and then he's always hoisting threats over her. But again, I mean, if you just have a normal person in opposition to Jessica Jones, it just kind of feels like, okay, there's a limit to that, right? And I just think that I don't think Salinger himself was that interesting. I think what he does and sort of what he represents is way more interesting than the character or the portrayal itself. And so I think that is a key distinguishing factor between Season 1 and Season 3, for example, because both have, really deranged criminal, or not criminals, but deranged individuals who are the antagonists. Season 2 was more about her mom, but Season 1 and 3, it's really these horrible people, right, doing horrible things. I just think that there's a tangible distinguishing factor between someone like David Tennant's Kilgrave and Salinger. So I think that's one thing that separates it. But again, I want to say that I think in concept, having this idea of somebody who is going around and killing people, and Jessica Jones has to figure out why and who and what the motive is, I think it all really adds up to a very solid premise for a show like this. And so I think that in itself kept me pretty interested. And we'll get to the things about Trish that I didn't love. Because, frankly, and if you've been listening to these segments for a little bit, I don't love the character of Trish. Frankly, I don't love a lot of these side characters as well. It is hard for characters to be this self-loathing and self-destructive, and for you to get attached to them. It's just hard. It's just hard to do. I think one of the things that endears you to characters like Karen and Foggy in Daredevil is because they are so pure. And it goes in contrast with a character like Jessica. But when Jessica is surrounded with people like Hogarth, who Hogarth is just off doing crazy and immoral things once again because of her greed and her erratic tendencies and things like that. And then you have characters like Malcolm, Malcolm is trying to do the right thing, but he just goes into a rut again. And it's hard to watch because you're rooting for Malcolm, but it's like, yeah, he just, goes and cheats on his girlfriend, and it's hard to watch. And then Trish is the most, it's the character that represents this most of all. So it is hard because I do think the side characters are very important to shows like these. And it's just, I found it hard to become attached to characters, these side characters, because they're just, it's hard to kind of grow emotionally attached to them. That being said, I do think, especially towards the end of this season, there's a lot they do with the character of Trish Walker that makes her more compelling as an antagonist. I think it was episode 11 that it was the sort of backstory episode where it flashed back to how she kills the police officer and goes after the arsonist. I think that episode where it kind of fills in all these things and she sort of turns into what I think the potential of a character like Jessica's mom was, where she was just sort of a person who loses control. I think this is far more compelling, because you understand that something broke inside of Trish after her own mom died, and now she kind of is seeking that sort of vengeance. So I think that all makes sense, right? That all really tracks for me as a concept, and I find that is, that's something compelling as well to consider with a character that is has gone through this much in her life, and we've seen it in the show. Again, though, I don't know if it's something about the performance of the actress who's playing Trish. I don't know, but there is just something, and I don't think Jessica Jones is written. It's not my favorite writing. I'll put it that way. Out of any of these shows, these Netflix Marvel shows, I don't know if they give Jessica Jones the best dialogue either. But man, whenever Trish talks, huh? That's funny. Trish talk. Whenever Trish says anything, it is so melodramatic. It is just the most melodrama I have ever seen, and I find that hard to connect with personally, where a character is going, I'm so angry, or I'm so hurt, or no, I need justice, those kinds of things. It's okay once in a while, but after a little bit, after 3 seasons, frankly, I just could not find myself to be compelled by that. So especially towards the beginning of this season, as Trish was sort of the focus as well as Salinger, I just could not really get on board with it. I think towards the end, like I said, there were things that they were doing with that character that were more interesting, but I don't know. I really couldn't get on board with it. Other notable things about this season, we have the introduction of a character like Eric, which frankly, at the beginning, when I realized that they were being serious about his powers just being sniffing out bad guys, which again, fully acknowledged, this might be a comic book thing, and I don't know. I haven't read the comic books to know enough about this character. I was a little silly at the beginning, but I will say this character really did grow on me, and I think that by the end of the season, I was like, yeah, you know what? This is a fun character to have around in the universe. I think still the power set is a little ridiculous, that he gets headaches when there are quote-unquote bad people. I don't quite know what that means. I don't quite know what how you distinguish that, but whatever. I think that's a fun character, and I think that the actor who played him was good. I think that he did a good job. And, I think that as you wrap up this season, it was a fine, solid season of television. Again, there are things I didn't love. I don't really love the side characters that much at all, frankly. I just think watching Jerry Hogarth do Jerry Hogarth things and watching Malcolm kind of regress back to sort of before he was putting himself back together. And again, I don't need these characters to be perfect, but it's just hard to watch because you're rooting for them. And then they kind of fall back into their old ways, and then Trish doing Trish things. But, the concepts of Salinger, the concept of Jessica kind of growing into that mindset of a hero, I didn't mind this season. I really didn't. It's not, again, this whole show is not going to go down to me as my favorite thing in the world. And frankly, as we discussed earlier on a couple months ago on the Access Blockbusters pod, if they are going to do a revival of Jessica Jones, I don't know if I'm going to be over the moon about that, just based on what I've seen here. But I am excited because I do think Kristen Ritter, for what it's worth, nails the character. I think that she does a great job. And I'm excited to see her, appear again with Charlie Cox. I think that there are a lot of fun avenues for this character to go down. And I'm excited. It's not an Iron Fist situation where, again, no shade or offense meant to the actor Finn Jones, but I just didn't love his portrayal as Danny Rand. And I frankly might have preferred Colleen Wing to be a new Iron Fist if she shows up. So again, and if that's been confirmed, by the way, since I recorded this segment, then, that's that. But I don't have the complete information. This is being recorded a while ago, so just so you guys know. But, I think that Kristen Ritter is a different case. I think that I would be very happy. I will be very happy to see her again in Daredevil Born Again Season 2. I think that her chemistry with Charlie Cox was really good in The Defenders. And I think that, for what it's worth, I'm glad that we ended on this note instead of Season 2. So anyways, guys, that was my revisiting, or rather first time watching, of Jessica Jones Season 3. Up next, hopefully, will be a revisiting of Daredevil Born Again Season 1, a ranking, and then we'll dive into Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Let me know what your thoughts are on Jessica Jones Season 3 in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, it is officially award season. We are in the thick of things in just about a month. Actually, under a month. Actually, a couple weeks. What am I saying? Couple weeks. We're going to be witnessing the Oscars, 2026 Oscars, and I am very excited that this year's class of films in the 2026 Oscars, I've almost gotten through all the films that I wanted to see before the Oscars, which I'm very excited about. And so, in the coming days and weeks, look forward to a video or a segment where I discuss some of my favorites from this year's Oscar class and whatnot. But part of the fun about the Oscars, too, is predictions, is about trying to guess which films are going to win, about seeing if your favorite films are at the top of the favorites and whatnot. And part of that build-up as well is other award shows that are going on right now. And so we don't cover every single award show because goodness knows there's so many. There's Golden Globes, there's BAFTAs, which we're going to talk about today, WGA Awards, the Writers Guild Awards, the Directors Guild Awards. There's so many different awards, the SAG Awards, right? So lots of different awards. We're just going to talk about the ones that I think are interesting and I think, maybe point to some of the directions that the Oscar race might be going in. So that's why we're here to talk about the BAFTAs today. Because I just think that in this moment in time, the BAFTAs point to an interesting snapshot of where potentially the Oscar race might be going. So again, we talked about the Golden Globes a few weeks ago, and I think that's interesting. None of these races, just to be clear, are definitive indicators of winners, right? And nothing, because the Oscar voting body is a unique voting body, as is the BAFTAs, as is the Golden Globes. So they are unique, right? But you can begin to see where momentum, because I do think momentum is a real thing. I don't know exactly when the Oscar voters cast their votes, but I have to imagine that just seeing momentum for a certain film is actually going to probably influence certain voters in different instances. So and I think that is an important category, concept to keep in mind. So without further ado, let's go through some of the major categories, major wins from the BAFTAs, and just see what we can glean from that. So first of all, and we're just going to start off with the biggest category here. Best film goes to One Battle After Another. Now last year, I thought, okay, The Brutalist. The Brutalist is winning all these different awards. I thought The Brutalist was going to take the Oscar by storm. But then, and this is why we do this, Anora started to gain momentum as we headed towards the final stretch there. And that's not something that I personally was able to pick up on. And I saw it just in the nick of time to switch a couple of my predictions at the last second to Anora, but I really just didn't have Anora winning Best Director and Best Picture. So One Battle After Another right now is the favorite. But remember, Sinners broke the record for most Oscar nominations. And there are other films like Marty Supreme, like Hamnet, like Sentimental Value that were all nominated that I think have legitimate shots at it. But again, it looks like it's One Battle After Another's to lose. Speaking of that, Best Director. And these are all, again, the films that are nominated here were just supremely directed by Yorgos Lanthimos for Begonia. He directed Poor Things as well. Chloe Zhao for Hamnet, thought she did a beautiful job there with Hamnet. Josh Safdie with Marty Supreme, just a crazy, chaotic film, but, a really interesting and entertaining one. One Battle After Another, though, of course, wins with Paul Thomas Anderson. And again, it just seems like that is sort of the duo, right, of Best Director and Best Picture. It seems like that is going to keep the trend with Oppenheimer, with Anora, and now looks like with One Battle After Another. We'll see. We'll see, right? Sentimental Value as well, and Sinners with Ryan Coogler. So again, a lot of interesting picks there. Best Leading Actor. This was a surprise to me because right now it really does look like it's Timothée Chalamet's to lose for Marty Supreme, except an actor who isn't even nominated for Best Leading Actor won the award, and Robert Aramayo for a movie called I Swear, which I haven't heard about before this. But Robert Aramayo, I believe, if that name sounds familiar, it sounded familiar to me. He is Elrond in The Rings of Power, so I think that's interesting. But he is not nominated for best actor. A lot of the other actors in this category are Timothée Chalamet, of course, Marty Supreme, who I just think is the front runner. This is one of the categories where, yeah, this is surprising, but also I just think Timothée Chalamet, it's his to lose. DiCaprio for One Battle After Another, Ethan Hawke for Blue Moon, which I just finished seeing. He's great in that, and of course Michael B. Jordan in Sinners, and then Jesse Plemons for Begonia. All great performances there. Best Leading Actress, no surprise here, it's Jessie Buckley for Hamnet. She did a phenomenal job, although, again, some other amazing performances in here. Rose Byrne, I want to highlight in If I Had Legs I'd Kick You. She was just incredible in that movie, but I do think that this is Jessie Buckley's award to lose. So I think that the Best Actor and the Best Actress races are starting to shape up and take form. Surprises can always come, but Timothée Chalamet and Jessie Buckley, I would put my metaphorical money, because I am not somebody who likes to bet or gamble, but I would put my metaphorical money on that. Best Special Visual Effects is Avatar Fire and Ash. If this movie doesn't win this category, I mean, this has to be, right, this is the lock of all locks here for the Oscars. If anybody thinks that a movie that is not Avatar Fire and Ash is going to win Best Visual Effects, I don't know what to say. That would be crazy. It would just be the upset of all upsets. So there is that. Best Supporting Actress. Now, I think that while the categories of Best Lead Actor and Lead Actress are pretty much locks for the Oscar, these next two, Supporting Actress and Supporting Actor, I think are very much up in the air. You have, in the BAFTAs, you have Odessa Zion for Marty Supreme. You have, and I'm always going to mispronounce these names, but Inga Ipsoder, I am totally butchering these names. Ipstother, who plays one of the leads in Sentimental Value, and then Wumi Musuku for Sinners, Carey Mulligan, The Battle of Wallace Island, Teyana Taylor for One Battle After Another, and Emily Watson for Hamnet. So this is a race that I think is just pretty much wide open. And interestingly, because I thought that Teyana Taylor was having, would have had a lot of momentum for this category, but Wumi Musaku, this is a day for terrible mispronunciations. I apologize, but she wins for Sinners. So that's an interesting category that I think is pretty much up in the air, in my opinion. There are a lot of names that could go there as well. And similarly, Best Supporting Actor, there are a lot of strong ones here. Benicio del Toro for One Battle After Another, Jacob Elordi for Frankenstein, Paul Mescal for Hamnet, Peter Mullen for I Swear, which is interesting, Sean Penn for One Battle After Another, and Stellan Skarsgård for Sentimental Value. And Sean Penn wins this one for One Battle After Another big winner for that film. Although I had thought previously, so again, just kind of shifting the narrative a little bit towards One Battle After Another, that Stellan Skarsgård was a very strong lock or not a strong lock, but a strong pick, rather, for Sentimental Value. So we'll see. Right, we'll have to see. There are some other categories like makeup and hairstyling, but really, I wanted to highlight, and I know I went through that really, really quickly. I wanted to highlight just some of the bigger winners and some of the more notable trends that are going on in the BAFTAs. Because again, it looks like, as we head into the final stretch for the Oscars, the momentum is with One Battle After Another. I said this last year about The Brutalist, though, so we'll have to see if that holds true. And I think that there are categories that are very much locks in my eyes, and I would just be stunned if something else happens. But there are other categories that I very much think are up in the air. So we'll have to see. I am, again, rounding out my last Oscar film that I want to watch before the actual awards. So we'll be doing our preview very, very soon. Very excited about that. But in the meantime, guys, what do you make of the BAFTAs? Do you think that any of these picks are precursors to the Oscars themselves? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, chalk this next topic up to a topic that I just could not have seen coming. You could have given me 10,000 guesses for what I might be talking about on episode number 121 of the Access Blockbusters pod. I would not have remotely thought this was going to happen. Apparently, what we're here to talk about today, apparently a Venom animated movie is coming. Now, there are a lot of things that we know about this movie already. There are also a good number of things that we just don't know about this movie. So there's a lot of ambiguity as to what this movie is going to be and what it's going to look like, but we'll just talk about what we know and then speculate maybe a little bit on what the blanks tell us about what this movie is, what this movie could possibly be. So this movie, this Venom animated movie, is coming from Sony Animation Studios, and that's important because that's obviously the studio that has brought us films like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, more relevantly to this franchise. And this film has a director, more accurately, a directing duo, with Final Destination Bloodlines duo Zach Lipovsky and Adam B. Stein. These two are going to be the directors for Venom, For the animated Venom film. They also directed the 2019 live-action Kim Possible movie. Okay, have not seen that. So I don't know a whole lot. I haven't watched any of the Final Destination films. I know that there are fans of that franchise. I personally have not seen any of this. Reading from this IGN article here, this is, and just reading some more details about what this movie could and could not be. This is what the IGN article has to say. Quote, the Venom animation is said to have series veterans Amy Pascal, Avi Arad, and Matt Tolmach in the mix, though the extent of their involvement is unclear. This is interesting. This part is interesting because a lot of other sources are reporting this as well. Quote, while Hardy is reportedly involved in the project, there's no word on whether he'll reprise his role as Eddie Brock after concluding the live-action trilogy as the character in Venom: The Last Dance. No specific writer has been named to pen the film's script as Sony Pictures Animation gets the ball rolling on its story. So Tom Hardy is actually reported to be involved in some capacity. I don't remember if it's as a producer or a writer or whatnot, but he is involved, I think, as a producer in this film. And a lot of the sources are saying, well, we don't actually know if he's going to come back to play Venom, because I think the most interesting thing about this movie in itself is, what is it, and is it connected to the Venom trilogy? And I could see it going both ways. What this IGN article points out, and I think that this is actually a good point, because remember, and we covered this on the channel. We covered this extensively on the channel. Remember, before Venom: The Last Dance came out, there was a lot of talk about Null. There was a lot of talk about Null. Turns out, in Venom: The Last Dance, a movie that I didn't really like, to be honest with you, in that movie, Null shows up for 3 minutes, basically, doesn't do a whole lot, and then disappears. And there's a post-credit scene with him. And that's it. There's nothing to do with Null. And there were all these teases of Null will return, and Null will come back, and Null will be a big villain. And there were even so many rumors about Null appearing in Spider-Man Brand New Day, which I just think is ridiculous. There's no way. There's no way. He's not appearing in Spider-Man Brand New Day. It doesn't make sense. But now, if you make an animated Venom movie, well, you can easily bring back Null, and you can do even crazier and wackier things. Not that the Venom films aren't crazy and wacky in themselves, they are. And I really like the first Venom, by the way. I think it's a really underrated comic book movie over the last 10 years or so. It's just fun. It's just really fun. But I think that if you wanted an avenue to explore the character of Null and the symbiote god and all of that good stuff that's going on that planet that I completely forget what the planet's called, then sure, make a Venom animated film and go for it and see what happens there. Now, obviously, this Venom animated film could be something completely different, right? I just find it interesting because I'm not saying that we're oversaturated with Venom, but we kind of are oversaturated with Venom. We got 3 live-action, standalone, non-Spider-Man related Venom films over the last, I think, 8 or so years. And again, you know, Venom is one of the most popular Spider-Man villains, although Spider-Man has not appeared in a Venom project in a while, aside from Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which is going to appear in a lot, according to reports and interviews, in the 2nd season. But I wonder what the aim of this is. The aim of this could just simply be, hey, we have an idea and we want to do it, in which case, great, fine. And if you do it in the animation style of Spider-Verse or do something else interesting, great, fine. But I am a little confused, but more so curious about where they're trying to go with this. Is this another attempt to expand this universe even further and get that Venom, Kraven, Morbius, Madam Web universe back up again? I doubt it, but still, you never know, right? Who knows? Maybe Madam Web appears in this animated movie. I have no idea. Is this just an idea similar to Spider Noir, where they're just like, hey, we have a good idea based on a character that's been pretty popular in other mediums, let's try to go for it. If that's the case, sure, let's do it, let's see it. But we'll probably not get this film for quite a while anyways. If this film is just starting to enter development, the animation obviously takes a while, and I would guess 2028, 2029 at the earliest, so we'll have to see when this film comes out. But interesting news, nonetheless, and something I wanted to discuss on this channel. Guys, what do you make of the fact that an animated Venom movie is coming out apparently from Sony Pictures Animation? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, we know Daredevil Born Again Season 2 is coming. In fact, it will be here before we know it, and we'll be doing our usual weekly reviews and spoiler discussions and whatnot for the show. I'm very excited about it because I think that this 2nd season has all the potential in the world to just be great. But interestingly enough, we also know that Daredevil Born Again Season 3 is coming, and it's probably coming soon. I think this is kind of unprecedented. We may be getting 3 seasons of a big franchise television show in 3 years. We could be looking at it in 2027, which I think is it's exciting. It's very exciting. And we have some new details now about what Season 3 is going to look like. First of all, though, Dario Scardapane, who is the showrunner for Daredevil Born Again Season 2 and 3, Season 1 as well, he gave some comments in a recent interview. And he was talking a little bit about just the process of how some of the things in Season 2 are mirroring, I think, some of the things that are happening in real life. So, again, the show meaning my show, this podcast, is not inherently political, but we are going to, we talk about things insofar as they relate to the stories that we're watching and just how they reflect real life. And so if you're not interested in that, skip ahead for a few seconds, but because we'll get to the Season 3 stuff in just a second, because again, he just gave a bunch of quotes here about what Season 2 is looking like. But this is what he had to say about Season 2. He said, reading these quotes here, quote, "The playbook is pretty well established. So when we were writing this stuff, we were like, here's what he does." He referring to Wilson Fisk. "The anti-vigilante task force is part of the comics. We built them and costumed them based on the comics. There are a few sequences that were shot a year ago that could be off the news, and it's weirding all of us out. I have mixed feelings. Stan Lee once said that he wanted to make his comic books a reflection of the world you saw outside your window. Then I also believe that what's fun about the genre, and definitely fun in working with superheroes, is you're dealing with huge archetypes, almost mythological characters, and that's fun writing. Getting into the realm of politics, New York politics, the Game of Thrones intrigue behind the scenes, okay, that's fun too. But as it becomes almost too topical, it feels like it's going away from that large mythological genre stuff. So again, we're not here to make giant political statements, but I think that regardless of whatever your political ideology is or affiliation is, I think that there are some interesting parallels between Daredevil Born Again Season 2 with the Anti-Vigilante Task Force and in which the ways in which our current U.S. government is utilizing immigration troops, for example, to, just sort of reflecting one another. And so I think that that's an interesting parallel that Dario Scartapane is making between the two of them. And it's just something that we should expect to see in Season 2. So there's that. Again, not a political show here, not a political podcast, but insofar as these things relate to one another, I think it's important to talk about them as well. But let's get on to Season 3. So then he finishes off this interview with this quote. Quote, "So as we finish up the MAYOR FISK storyline, or Fisk run in Season 2, as that storyline comes to its inevitable conclusion, what we're doing going forward feels more like a return to the Frank Miller era comics. So yeah, it was fun to play in the realm of politics, but I like something a little more street level personally." So I think that this is a fascinating quote here. And I think that, you might be tempted to read this quote here and be like, well, you don't have to have either situation. You don't have to have no politics and only street level, or only street level and no politics. I don't think that's quite what he's talking about here. I think that what he more means is that we're going to get away from the government office side of politics, because if you watch Daredevil Born Again, or Daredevil Season 3 rather, it's very political. There's a lot of corruption and all that stuff going on with the FBI, with Nadeem. So that I don't think we're getting away from that necessarily. What I do think that he is hinting at is, A, the Fisk storyline, the majority of the MAYOR Fisk storyline is going to end with Season 2. But B, that just, I think as a tangent to that, we're going to get away from now the more government side of this political side. Again, I don't think he's saying that the show is going to stop being political in nature, but just that we're going to get away from the politics in general, or just as a concept. And then we're going to get to more of maybe gang wars or things like that. If you know Dario Scartapane, he was the showrunner for Punisher. And Punisher is, I think there are political aspects to that show for sure, but it is very much a street level story about a vigilante who is on a mission. And I think that if that's what Daredevil Born Again Season 3 is about, I think that is also a very interesting place to take him. And you also have to remember too, Daredevil is not just attached to the character of Kingpin, right? And we forget often, but the majority of Season 2 of Daredevil did not have Kingpin, because I think it makes sense. Kingpin cannot just be the villain of Daredevil forever. And what I really liked about Season 3 is that while Kingpin returned to the forefront, there was another prominent villain in Bullseye. And so I'm hoping that, yes, you finish it all up in Season 2 and Fisk is the big presence and whatnot. And even if you don't kill off the character in Season 2, make him, he's in the background, he's doing things, but there's another threat brewing, right? And I think that would be the intrigue for Daredevil Born Again Season 3. So I think that this is a good thing, because again, I've been saying for a while, I said it in my trailer reaction for Season 2, you gotta find new avenues and new interesting villains and new aspects of Daredevil to explore. And I think that all of that will be really, really interesting moving forward. Guys, what do you make of these comments about Daredevil Born Again Season 2? And more importantly, I think, for this particular segment, what he's saying, what Dario Scartapane, the showrunner for Daredevil Born Again Season 2, what he's saying about Season 3. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, it has been a little bit quiet on the movie front, I'm not gonna lie. Which is good, because usually the first couple months gives me a chance to catch up on some of the Oscar movies from the previous year, which I have been doing. So look forward to some more content about that, where I discuss some of my rankings for the Oscar movies and things like that in the near future. So that's exciting. But it's been a little bit quiet in terms of new releases. However, I think, and you can dispute me on this, the only film I've really seen in theaters that has been a 2026 release so far has been Crime 101, which was a fun movie. But let's be honest, the real movie season kicks off in March. And this year it kicks off in March with none other than Phil Lord and Chris Miller's Project Hail Mary, based on a book by Andy Weir, who also wrote The Martian, and then that was adapted into another movie that I thought was really great. But I've read both The Martian and recently Project Hail Mary, both amazing books. And Project Hail Mary, I'd heard a lot. I'd seen a lot from the trailers. I thought it was interesting. So I decided, you know what? I really enjoyed The Martian. I really enjoyed that book. I really enjoyed that movie. I wanted to read the book. I'm a big fan of reading. I really like reading books. And so I was just really excited. So I read the book. I loved the book. And ever since then, I've been really excited. And I think that this movie has a chance. I've said it before, especially if you go look at my most anticipated movies of 2026 and some box office predictions. I thought this movie could do well. I just wasn't sure how well. Because I know that the trailers are intriguing and they look good. But the general movie-going audience, is this going to be a case of, a Ryan Gosling movie that kind of falls flat, like Fall Guy a couple years ago? Is this going to be a case of Barbie that comes out of nowhere and it surprises everybody? I don't know. I'm just using those movies because they have Ryan Gosling. They're not really, apropos of nothing. And I really want this movie to do well if it's good, right? But the question is, how good is it going to be? Well, we have our first reactions for Project Hail Mary, and they are better. They are better than I could have possibly imagined. So some critics, have had a chance to see the film now. And these are just first reactions. We'll get a better sense of what critics really feel. Because again, first reactions generally, this is my word of caution, first critic reactions, not reviews, right? The Twitter reactions, the social media reactions are generally skewing more positive than not. Because people want to get out that their quick thoughts. And generally speaking, nobody in their quick thoughts says, this movie sucks. I've rarely seen that. My one example that I always come back to is The Rise of Skywalker. When The Rise of Skywalker came out, I was monitoring social media when those reviews or when those reactions were coming out, and they were pretty positive. I read things like, great way to end the Skywalker saga, such a fitting end to the saga. And then the reviews actually came out and it kind of tanked to like a 50-something% on Rotten Tomatoes, right? So reactions are reactions, reviews are really what we're looking for. But obviously, the obvious has to be stated, you would much rather have good reactions than not. And let's read a couple of them here. I'm looking at a Variety article that has compiled a few of them. Quote, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller's must-see Space Odyssey blasts off as the first great blockbuster of 2026. Out-of-this-world cinematography from Greg Fraser reaches for the stars while anchored by a stellar Ryan Gosling performance. This movie rocks. There are actually there are a lot of puns in that review, but I'm not going to go into that, in that reaction rather. Next one up here. Quote, Lord and Miller's latest plays up a short-circuit bromance to a hysterical extreme while simultaneously delivering a pulse-pounding space epic that brings true humanity to the center stage, but not without some jaw-dropping visuals alongside. The visuals, by the way, have been something that I've just been super surprised about because they just look incredible. I mean, I was expecting good things, but I mean, the visuals look amazing, and I actually just recently got my tickets to see this movie in IMAX, so I am so excited about that. I cannot wait to see that. But anyways, let's go on here. Next one up. Quote, not quite faster than light script, with too many endings and one crucial plot point that evaporates, plus a seeming corporate obligation to Amazon's rocky catalog, cannot suppress the galaxy-sized charms of Ryan Gosling. So that's a little bit more of a negative review, but still pretty decent. Interstellar without all of the quote-unquote stuff is what he said there. Let's read another couple here. Project Hail Mary is an epic cinematic achievement. Phil Lord and Chris Miller somehow managed to raise the bar once again while delivering what is not only their most ambitious film to date, but arguably their most accomplished. And then let's read one more here. A sophisticated blend of humor, sci-fi, drama, and suspense, Ryan Gosling is the shining star of this compassionate story about connection and defying the odds, while Sandra Hüller is the tender heart of this beautiful film. So having read the book here, I'm already beginning to see where some of these connections are being made, I hope, at least from what critics are saying. And I'm just excited. I'm so excited, just to see this film in IMAX. I love science fiction films. I love fiction films that are, yes, grand in scope and grand in scale, but also bring the humanity, right? Bring the true humanity to their projects. And the book does this, I think, incredibly well. And I have all the faith in the world that the movie can as well. So we read a couple reviews that weren't as amazing, but still, I think that if you're talking about first great blockbuster of 2026, Ryan Gosling gives a great performance. Visuals are amazing. Story has humanity and heart. That's all I'm looking for. And I'm so excited. So guys, what do you think of these first reactions to Project Hail Mary, the new Ryan Gosling movie coming out in late March? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, talk about a crazy franchise. The Spider-Man universe of Marvel characters, or whatever they were going to call it at some point. What a crazy universe. It all started, I think 2018, I want to say, with Venom, the first Venom film. And that film starred Tom Hardy. And you know what? I watched that movie in theaters. I liked it. It was fun. It was really fun. I enjoyed it. And then came Venom Let There Be Carnage. And I liked it. Thought it was okay. But in the midst of all of this chaos, you got your Morbius. You got your Kraven the Hunter. And of course, you have your Madam Web. You also have Venom the Last Dance, which I would argue is not my favorite film that any Marvel company has ever done. It just wasn't that great, in my opinion. I have a review on the channel when we watched it a couple years ago, so go check that out. But anyways, the Sony universe of Marvel characters. And also, we've discussed, because, let's face it, Madam Web, Morbius, and Kraven the Hunter have come out to abject criticism and failure in terms of both box office and critical reception and audience reception. But let's face it, right? I mean, we've seen these crazy and strange comments from people within Sony. We did a segment on this a while ago where, I forget who it was. It wasn't the CEO of Sony, but it was somebody within Sony who said, oh no, it's the audience's fault that these movies don't do well. So there's just a lot of weird disconnects going on. And obviously Madam Web went through a lot of reshoots and a lot of ADR, it looks like. These films just, aside from the first Venom films, these films go through a lot, it feels like. And it's all, I mean, again, we talk a lot on this channel about altruistic or external motivations, I should say. And whether or not, are artists out there just to make art? Of course they are, but then the studios, are they just out there to make money? Well, kind of, but there's sort of a marriage between the both of them, right? Where, yes, the studios are out to make more money and the artists are there to make more art, but there is a blend between those two things. So yeah, is it true that Sony is probably making these movies just to have the rights to these Spider-Man characters? Because they do have to make these kinds of movies, I believe, within their legal agreement for the Spider-Man character in order to retain the rights. Is it possible that they're just doing it because of that? Sure. Is it also possible that these people were trying to make good movies? Absolutely. So again, it's sort of an interesting gray area to explore there. Anyways, we got Kraven the Hunter recently, and that sort of ended, I think, what was this universe. But then, there are questions of, are you ever going to return to that? And we talked earlier in the podcast about this animated Venom film. And Tom Hardy is attached to it in some capacity. We don't know what capacity. We don't know if he's returning to play Venom himself or if it's just as a producer. But there is going to be some sort of continuity with Tom Hardy and this Venom character. And then the CEO of Sony, Tom Rothman, was speaking on a podcast, I think. And when asked about whether or not they would return to this Spider-Verse, these Spider-Man spin-off characters, first of all, they asked him, is this universe dead? Or are you not going to return to the Spider-Verse? He said, no, it's not over. And when asked if they had plans to return to this universe, he said yes. And one has to assume, right? Because I think that what was implicit in these comments in this interview was that they were not going back to the original iteration of whatever that universe was, the Madam Web of it all, with Vulture showing up in the middle of nowhere, right? Loosely based on Spider-Man No Way Home. That doesn't make any sense with the context of that movie, so I don't know what was going on there. Anyways, doesn't really matter. But they're not going to return to that universe, but they are still planning on continuing on this larger Spider-Verse. Maybe Spider-Noir is part of this, right? Maybe it's sort of an attempt to do a live-action Spider-Verse. Maybe this animated Venom film is a part of this, right? Who knows? And look, I think that in a vacuum, this idea is not a bad one. Keep making Spider-Man films, because if you do it the right way, I liked Venom. And Venom was not a movie that Marvel Studios was going to make. I mean, it's the argument about, yes, I'm glad that the MCU now has the X-Men films, and I cannot wait to see what the MCU proper X-Men, we're not talking about the X-Men and Avengers Doomsday, just talking about the proper X-Men. I'm really excited to see what the MCU can do. But also, Fox made really good X-Men movies. X-Men Days of Future Past stacks up there to me with just about any top-tier X-Men or any top-tier Marvel Studios movie. It's really good. And some of those old Spider-Man movies, Spider-Man 2, right? I think that some of those movies are great. So I think that, there is a lot of potential still with these characters, even without Spider-Man. And who knows, maybe Spider-Man will appear in them at some point, a version of Spider-Man, whether it's Tom Holland or Andrew Garfield or Tobey Maguire or Miles Morales, who knows. So at the end of the day, right, I'm not going to blanket statement and say, oh no, they made terrible movies, they're going to make terrible movies again. That's not the case. That's not always going to be the case. It doesn't have to be the case. It's possible if they have the wrong people in charge, once again, in charge of these movies, but I just don't think that it's a guarantee that that's going to happen. So they're going back to this well at some point. I think they kind of have to. They have this arrangement with Marvel Studios, but I think they still need to make these movies in order to retain the rights. So we'll see. But I would be just curious. I'd be curious to see if they approach it any differently. Are they going to be interconnected? Are they just going to be standalone films? We'll have to see about that. Guys, what do you make of this? That the CEO of Sony seems to indicate that they are going to be returning to the Spider-Man universe, Spider-Verse, characters at some point in the near future. Let me know in the comments down below. And guys, that will do it for episode number 121 of the Axis Blockbusters Pod. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, guys, make sure to hit the subscribe button on the way out if you could. We are so close to 2,000 subscribers. So again, road to 2,000. Thank you so much for joining us along the way. And make sure to check out the podcast on the audio-only platforms as well, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Anchor. Or not Anchor, Overcast. I always mix that up. It used to be Anchor. Anyways, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Overcast as well. Guys, thank you so much for joining us this week, and I will see you guys in the next one.